All right, guys, what is up? These are 9 dumb deck concepts using the new cards revealed to us from the Empires of the Ascended expansion. So here I'm going to break down deck concepts all the way up from the start of reveals to the Taliyah reveals, which is from the time of recording. I'm going to do this as a second part in another video later when we have more cards revealed. But basically, I'm going to go through all the cards we've seen so far and break down a bunch of terrible concept meme decks that you can use with these cards combined with probably some pre-existing cards. So here's the thing though, which is that not all of these decks will actually end up being dumb decks, right? This is a dumb deck concepts video. The cool thing is that, you know, once in a great while, something that looks really dumb at first ends up actually making sense as a deck. I can tell you half the things in this video stand no chance at that, but it's still cool to just do this kind of like theory craft phase, even when just a lot of the ideas are completely harebrained. A lot of these ideas are ones that I've kind of been developing with you guys. I've been spending a lot of time in Twitch chat and just kind of like talking with you guys while I'm streaming and coming up with ideas together, different ways to use these. And some of you guys I'll be able to kind of like credit as I do this. But as an example, you guys remember the like the infinite Zephyr Sage deck with revitalizing Roar playing like infinite 0 mana Zephyr Sages that I made that the devs hotfixed in like 2 days? That was actually a deck that came from one of these kinds of videos, just a dumb deck ideas video that came from chat, which is pretty cool. All right, in no particular order, concept number 1, the quad Taliyah, as I've been calling it. This one's pretty dumb. Buckle up, boys. All right, so Taliyah, as you guys know, we've talked about this, is a champion where you get to summon an exact copy of an allied landmark, all right? Next, we've got Ancient Hourglass, which can obliterate any ally and summon a stasis statue in its place, right? Pretty simple. Lastly, we've got the final piece of the puzzle, Promising Future. Grant an allied landmark. My countdown completion effect activates twice. Okay, so here's where it gets pretty disgusting, right? Well, naturally, we can redouble these effects. If we use, of course, you know, Ancient Hourglass on a Taliyah, we are going to take that Taliyah and make her into a stasis statue. We can then, if we want, use Promising Future on that stasis statue, so it gets my countdown completion effect activates twice. That is obviously going to make 2 Taliyahs when it ends. The third thing we can do is we can play a second Taliyah from hand. What that will do is it will create an exact copy of the stasis statue landmark, which means we will get 4 Taliyahs when the stasis statue expires at the end of the turn. That'll happen literally as soon as the turn ends, which means we're going to get 4 Taliyahs off of that. 5 if you include the one we just played from hand to get that to work. Now, why this is actually kind of disgusting, because this is obviously a meme combo, but why this is actually kind of hilariously disgusting is because of a quirk with how Taliyah works and with how the stack in Legends of Runeterra works, okay? So Taliyah, when she attacks and you have a landmark on the board, she actually triggers her ability 3 times, as you can see here, which puts 3 different skills on the stack in Legends of Runeterra. What a lot of you guys might not know, some of you guys know this, is that in Legends of Runeterra, the stack has a limit, a hard limit, in fact, a limit of 9. There's only 9 things that can go on the stack. Now, it's possible they'll change this. We don't know. The patch isn't out yet. But in the current game, if you attack with 3 or more Taliyahs, you will immediately, without any opportunity at a response, fill the entire stack, because it just takes 3 or more Taliyahs for the opponent to not be able to play any spells. Nothing can go on the stack. Nothing can resolve. They cannot react at all if you just attack with 3 Taliyahs and just completely block out the stack from being something that they can use, which is really hilarious and, yeah, actually a little bit degenerate. Now, you'll notice the important thing about this, because I did just show you guys like the full meme combo at the start. The important thing about this Taliyah interaction is, again, keep in mind, you only need 3 Taliyahs to be able to fill the stack entirely and stop the opponent from playing anything on your attack. But what that means is you actually don't really need the Promising Future. This is kind of an extra step that is kind of funnier. You can get more Taliyahs, but if you just play one Taliyah out onto your board and you just use one Ancient Hourglass on it, okay, then you've got the Stasis statue. Then as soon as you play the second Taliyah, which you'll have to do on the next turn, you'll have to have the first Taliyah, and then next turn you Hourglass into second Taliyah. And as soon as you play this Taliyah, cloning the Stasis statue, you'll get 2 Stasis statues, and when that ends, you'll end up with a board of 3 Taliyahs. So you don't need the Promising Future at all. To be able to fill the stack, it's a completely unnecessary part of this. It's just kind of additionally funnier if you want to fill your board with Taliyahs. 3 Taliyahs off of just these 3 cards, Taliyah once, and then Ancient Hourglass, and then a second Taliyah, and your opponent can't react to your attack, which I find hilarious. All right, deck concept number 2. We have Golden Aegis with Taric. Now, Taric is not a good card. Taric will maybe never be a good card. Golden Aegis is a way to make him a little bit less bad. So Golden Aegis on Taric. Now, I should mention this would be a deck that runs, Targon, Demacia. It would probably run Fiora as well. Actually, a long time ago when Taric came out, a lot of the better performing decks were Taric, Fiora. It wasn't that bad. Obviously, not the most competitive deck. But as far as Taric decks go, Fiora and Demacia was kind of already one of the better ways to use it. Suddenly, Golden Aegis is actually pretty decent as a Taric copy spell. Because keep in mind, when you use Golden Aegis on Taric, he'll get the barrier and it'll rally. And then as soon as you attack with Taric, he'll clone the Golden Aegis, which gives the barrier to the unit and it'll rally again. You'll have 2 attacks. Now, he can't attack infinitely, unfortunately, because Taric, they did give Taric a while ago. They gave him a clause just because of this, because there used to be an interaction in development where you could attack infinitely with Fizz's spell. You can't do that. It's not going to be able to allow you to repeat this infinitely. It's only going to clone it once that turn. However, it's still a pretty good value play. Like, that's still a very powerful combo. And being able to just whip out your Aegis on Taric, get 2 rallies, get 2 barriers, and of course you're getting a lot of level progress on the Taric. The support's going off twice. Is still going to actually be pretty decent. I don't expect this to be super competitive, but I might actually be able to make some kind of solid tier 3 deck out of this. Maybe not that bad. Okay, concept number 3. Shurima Undying. All right, so you guys all know the card Undying. You are familiar with this card. The Shadow Isles, kind of like infinite unit. It is kind of like a decent, hard tech for a really heavy control meta. Pretty much a meme card. Now, in Shurima, it's still going to be a meme card. It's not going to be good. But what you can do, if you were so inclined, is you can take your Undying game to the next level using a lot of the Shurima tools that give stuff like Challenger and stuff like Vulnerable, and some of the sacrifices, like, for example, Rite of Dominance being a pretty decent sacrifice for the Undying. Undyings are usually very vulnerable to open attacks because, of course, Undying, you don't have blockers because all you have are the Undyings. Usually what happens is when I'm against an Undying deck, I'll open attack. And what that means is we're going to want an open attack Punisher. Rite of Dominance is pretty great for that. If they attack in without developing, we can just, make the enemies all -2 attack. Very simply for just the price of buffing one of our Undyings. Even better, right? So, Undying with some of the Shurima tools is looking pretty decent. Really not that bad. We've got some of the vulnerable cards, like, for example, if we want to be able to run stuff like Ruthless Predator or Exhaust, Undying can work with those, and we can even actually try to fit in a renekton concept as well, because with some of the vulnerability, renekton and Undying will kind of both work together in that way. Although at the point where we're adding renekton, it might be kind of too close to an actual deck. I know Undying looks like it's kind of decent. I promise you guys, it's not actually going to be good. I'm sorry. It has happened twice in Legends of Runeterra that Undying deck has been a very niche tournament pickup, and that can sometimes happen in really heavy control metas in a very specific tournament lineup. But outside of something like that, the biggest problem with Undying is actually pretty straightforward, which is that all the death trigger cards end up being kind of at a speed Undying doesn't play at. Stuff like Ravenous Butcher and Blooded Caretaker, those cards are really great, but they kind of want your deck to play faster, and at that point you're just cutting the Undying because you're just killing them way too fast. Alright guys, but here we are. arriving at a card that has slowly become one of my favorite cards in this expansion. Xenotype Researchers. All right, so this is concept number 4, I think. I've already lost track. Xenotype Researchers, I'll give you a spoiler. This is actually in multiple decks in this video. Xenotype Researchers, I love. 3 mana, 3/3. When I'm summoned, grant 3 random allies in your deck +3/+3. So I'm already planning on doing some dumb shit with this one. There's some deck concepts that I'm just waiting to play. Probably will mess around with them on day 1 of the expansion, actually. I'll talk about the first one here, which is Xenotype all-in Renekton, baby. So this is a deck you guys might, if you were watching my stream yesterday, you might have heard me mention this concept, but I didn't go super in detail about the deck build. So this is an all-in deck. I am running 3 copies of Xenotype Researchers. I'm running 3 copies of Renekton, and I'm running 34 spells. So here's how we're going to do this. This is a Freljord deck. I'm running Entreat to be able to pull Renekton out of my deck. Xenotype Researchers, when I play this card, it will buff 3 out of my 5 units in my deck, maybe even less depending on my hand, and that will, in all likelihood, hit one of the Renektons, and I can Entreat into a permanently 7/7 Renekton. And of course, this is without Renekton's buffing itself either. When I challenge something, it'll be a 9/8 instead of a 7/7. And I'll be able to end the game in as few as 2 attacks. So let me paint you a picture, right? It goes something like Xenotype Researchers on turn 3. Into turn 4, jamming Entreat into a 4 mana 7/7 Overwhelm Renekton, curving out with Exhaust for the -2 and Vulnerable, and then swinging our big crocodile dick for 9 Overwhelm on turn 4. Threatening a literal 2-turn clock. I'm like, my Renekton's literally, the Nexus is dying without a response. The Nexus is dying before my Renekton's even leveling, baby. And as you can imagine, in this deck, we're able to tap into the pretty high amount of value spells these regions have with, you know, stuff like Quicksand, with the stuff that we're going to need for the Renekton like Ruthless Predator and Exhaust. And of course, we've got a lot of Freljord spells that are able to come down. You know, you guys all know the Freljord spells, stuff like Troll Chant, stuff like Brittle Steel. You know, you can already imagine the deck playing out in your head. I might be inclined to run Starlit Seer. As you guys have known, I've built actually several decks that operated under pretty similar premises in the past. Starlit Seer, I could see trying that in, but I don't want to run too many units, so I don't know if I can fit more than 6. We'll see. But either way, this deck actually probably wouldn't be that bad. It would be pretty funny. One thing that's actually really important is this card, Ancient Preparations. Now, normally with an all-in version of a Xenotype deck, we lose the ability to run units, which kind of sucks, right? Because if we run other units, we risk Xenotype buffing the wrong cards. But, of course, since we have access to Ancient Preparations, it gives us a nice proactive 1-drop that will give us the 2 mana 2/2 Clockling that, you know, it just gives us board presence without being something that diminishes Xenotype value. And I mean, it's just a good card for combo decks because we get to predict for 1 mana when we play it. Now, another really cool thing about this deck archetype that I also haven't mentioned is that we get to run a very special card for this. We get to run Ancient Hourglass. Now, I've talked about Ancient Hourglass, and you guys know I love this card. I think it's super cool. I think it's great design. I can promise you guys it's not going to be super OP. It's very good. It might be a little bit weaker than some of us think. Like, it's pretty good. It exists on the competitive level. I don't even think it's necessarily auto-include per se, but it's a super solid card that's flexible, it's counterable, it's a good kind of like soft counter to certain things, and it keeps itself in check. Now, Ancient Hourglass in this deck can do several things. Well, first of all, we do have the ability to use it to save our Renekton, right? Because the stasis statue that Ancient Hourglass generates will summon an exact copy of something. So our Renekton will maintain all of its buffs or anything I've given it if I have to protect it from something with an Ancient Hourglass, which is still nice. But what I might even be more inclined to do with Ancient Hourglass is just using it on the Xenotype. Ancient Hourglass triggers the summon ability of the unit again for 2 mana because it takes it away for a turn and it re-triggers the summon ability. And so for 2 mana, spell mana, in fact, that I can play with my Xenotype on turn 3, I can play Xenotype into Hourglass, Xenotype will then buff the top card of, well, not the top card, but it'll buff the 3 cards on my deck twice over 2 rounds, and I will almost have enough mana for the entry into the Crocodile Man exactly that turn. So it's like 1 turn late, but we're doubling up on our buff, and we're often going to end up with a 10-10 Crocodile Overwhelm without even doing anything else, just off of the double Xenotype buff. Now, this deck, you know, I might be also running additional cards such as Battle Fury. I haven't, like, you know, I can't build the deck yet. We don't know all the Shurima cards. So we could run stuff like Battle Fury, and this can really be a proper, you know, OTK deck even. I do want to point out that this probably looks like a complete meme. You know, this is probably not going to hit tier lists, but I think this will at least be surprisingly solid. So we haven't even seen the other Shurima cards yet, so we don't know like what kinds of things will be hitting this deck as well. But I really want to point out, I mean, part of the reason I like this card so much, Ancient Hourglass, is I think it will actually enable strategies like this to really work beyond the point that they're currently working, right? Like suddenly when my renekton attacks and you can't just like hush block it, I have the ability to, yeah, sure, you're canceling my 1 attack, but if you can't race me down, if your hush is down, then suddenly I have a renekton next turn. If I Battle Fury it, I can kill you from 20 health if I'm building an all-in deck, right? That, like, I will just buff my renekton up more, and it will just grow bigger, and, you know, a Vengeance will do the same thing as a hush. It'll stop a single attack, and I can protect with Hourglass, right? So basically, it just gives me the ability to actually have a kind of go a little bit more all in on a single unit, right? And again, it'll be better than it probably sounds to those of you guys who are skeptical about these kinds of all-in decks, right? So the other benchmark for success in these kinds of cheesy combo decks, these like very early blowout combo decks, is can they outrace aggro, right? Do I just have to stall versus aggro, or can I actually rush them down? And I'm actually pretty confident I'm going to be able to build this deck in a way that I can race aggro decks very well. We're killing them super fast, and with a lot of the cheap Freljord and Shurima tools for stabilization. I mean, I'm going to be running stuff like, you know, Quicksand will shut down a lot of attacks. We're going to be running stuff like the Freezes. I don't think I'll have to run something like Avalanche easily. I'm pretty sure I can race down aggro even without that. And if we can race down aggro, then suddenly this deck becomes a very real thing. All right, next up, concept number 5, Taliyah with Dawn and Dusk. All right, I should have mentioned this during the Taliyah section, but another thing you can do with Taliyah is you don't need to get 3 Taliyahs by doing this thing with the Ancient Hourglass and the second Taliyah. You can just use Dawn and Dusk on the level Taliyah, and you'll have 3 Taliyahs, and you'll be able to stop spells when you attack, which is pretty funny. That's it. That's all number 5 is. I just forgot to mention this earlier. Number 6, we've got this idea of Shurima fearsomes. So you guys, you know, may have seen in some of the videos I was talking about this, and I was talking about it with Precipic, which is we liked the idea of trying some kind of Shurima fearsome blend with a couple of these tools. Rite of Dominance in particular has a really kind of perfect alignment with Harrowing. Now 13 mana is pretty hard to get, but in the games where the Harrowing decks do get to 13 mana, it's just the perfect curve play. The Rite of Dominance, which will, you know, kill off something that's clogging your Harrowing. If you've played fearsome Harrowings, you know how much of a problem it is for that deck, that there's just so often just like, if you're against smart opponents, they'll leave like one of your spiders alive or something, so your Harrowing won't be amazing. Rite of Dominance will allow you to kill off one of your spiders and immediately give all enemies -2 attack this round. And your Harrowing is bringing back fearsomes. It's bringing back maybe like skitters and stuff. So your Rite of Dominance might completely blow out the opponent blockers just by not letting them block fearsomes. You're killing an ally on top of that. Seems pretty good. And of course, it's flexible. That's just what I gave you as kind of like the sort of not ideal combo. But you can use Rite of Dominance in any turn in that deck. You can use it defensively. You can use it offensively without Harrowing. It's a pretty neat combo. Raz Bloodmane, I'm a little skeptical about. Unfortunately, 7 mana, I'm thinking is probably a hair too much for this card. At 6, I think I'd like it quite a bit more. But there's other ways in fearsome decks when we open attack, we can delete fearsome blockers. Exhaust being a really good example of that. with exhaust, we can give one of the enemies -2 attack, and we can use something like a spider, something that's completely useless, to drag what would otherwise be a fearsome blocker. And exhaust can, for 1 mana at burst speed, focus speed, you can immediately take away 2 fearsome blockers. That's so crazy. All right, dumb deck idea number 7. Kahiri the Returned. When I'm summoned, create a concept of me in your deck. When you see me in a prediction, grant all allied copies of me everywhere +2/+2. And every time it'll create more copies of himself, so he'll never run out. So what if we use Kahiri the Returned as the only unit in a War Mother's Call deck? So for those of you guys who were wondering, this is not my idea actually. This one I have to credit Grappler for. This is also probably the dumbest idea on this list. This one's really funny. It is hilarious imagining just an inevitable supply of Kahiri Returned that are often going to be buffed because we'll have some sources of prediction. Of course, we will be able to run Ancient Preparations as another non-unit that will predict and can sometimes see Kahiri, and the War Mothers will just consistently pull Kahiri. This is not really going to make sense. It's just, I guess, like, it's a funny thing to do. This will work a lot better if we get more predictions that are spell-based, because right now the biggest problem is it's kind of hard to run Aspiring Chronomancer in this deck. We need to run few units so that the War Mothers won't, you know, pull those out instead. Might be able to fit in some Chronomancers, but we can't play too many unit-based predictions. If we have some better spell-based predictions that might align with a control strategy, this would still not be the best way to close out the game, but it's certainly one of the funniest. All right, concept number 8. You guys knew this was coming. All right, it's Fiora Shurima. It's so simple. It's always been Fiora Shurima. You guys saw what happened last time when, like, Sparklefly came out? I just made a Fiora Targon deck. You guys think I'm not just gonna make a Fiora Shurima deck, like, at the start of the expansion on day 1 and just post a deck guide for everyone? Fiora Shurima. All right, it's perfect. So, of course, Shurima is going to have a lot of combat tricks that work really well for the Fiora game plan. Cards like Quicksand, cards like Exhaust, and then, of course, we've got powerful cards like Golden Aegis. Aegis, of course, is a pretty good card in Fiora. Gives her Barrier and a Rally, basically a free kill, everything a growing Fiora needs. So, I mean, honestly, we haven't seen enough Shurima cards yet. Oh, yeah, also I'd run Shapestone in that deck because it's just a slightly better Radiant Strike, and Fiora is kind of the only deck that Radiant Strike has actually been running. That's pretty much all we got so far. But honestly, given the amount of Shurima cards we've seen, and the fact that we're expecting some more, and like some of them are gonna make some sense with Fiora, like given this amount so far, I can already tell you I'm at least gonna try to make a Fiora Shurima deck. Honestly, this one's kind of like a cop-out answer. It probably doesn't even really deserve a slot in this video because it's just another Fiora deck. But I'll be trying to make something work. And who knows? I mean, without knowing the rest of Shurima's tools, maybe it'll be tier 4, maybe it'll be tier 1. We have no idea. All right, and I've saved the best for last, actually. Speaking of degenerate decks that I've built in the past, you guys do remember that Fiora Sparklefly deck, right? Well, what if we took that one step further? All right, what if we ran Xenotype Researchers? We ran a deck with Targon, because of course we're running Targon. We're running, you know, Aphelios, because of course we're running Aphelios. But here's the thing. We're running Sparklefly. Okay, ignore my typos. We're running Sparklefly, baby. And you know what? We're using Xenotype Researchers. It'll buff 3 random cards. If we're short decked, if we have a very small amount of units to buff, Xenotype Researchers has good odds of buffing 1 or even 2 of our Sparkleflies. And we can play multiple Xenotypes. And we can reuse the Xenotype ability with the Hourglass, as we mentioned before, right? So suddenly, we've got a deck where we're gonna have some buffed Sparkleflies. Each of these Xenotypes buffs our deck a total of +9/+9. Now, that's not necessarily great, but to be able to use this better, we're going to be tutoring these cards. We're going to be pulling them out and choosing which ones we draw. So as with a lot of decks, we're using Ancient Preparations. I do love this card. It's super cool. And as mentioned, you guys probably have made this connection. We're using Crescendum. So Aphelios and Gifts from Beyond is going to give us access to Crescendum. Crescendum will summon a 2-cost follower from our deck. Well, what 2-cost followers in this deck? Oh, it's Sparklefly, the only 2-cost follower in this deck. Oh, that's weird. It's a Sparklefly that's been buffed by a Xenotype. A 2-mana, 4/5 elusive lifesteal. Permanently. Ah, alright. Sounds good. Oh, what's that you say? We're giving it Overwhelm with Aphelios? Yeah, and Aphelios picks up buffs pretty well too, because I don't know if you guys know this about this Aphelios card, but he kind of like, he doesn't say he has like Overwhelm or lifesteal on him, but he kind of basically does. Like, if Aphelios picks up the buffs, and he will, I'll just play a 6/6 Aphelios and I'll give him like Overwhelm and lifesteal and shit. I don't care. Like, it's gonna be fun fine either way, right? And of course, as with many unit-less decks, or kind of like low on unit decks, I would have to run, 31 spells and landmarks to fill the slots. But with a combination of Targon and Shurima, I should have no problem. Targon excels at these just like low unit count, high spell density decks, and we're gonna be able to have actually pretty decent reliability over this. So again, I mean, it's way too early to tell like what is going to be bad or what is going to be good. Different things have just different amounts of potential. This is one of the ones that has a bit of a higher degree of potential. And credit to Silverfuse, because I was talking about this with her and we built this deck together, and it is pretty cool. All right, and that's it. That's my 9 dumb deck concepts videos. Some of these are dumber than others, and some of these I'm actually just interested in trying out early on, just to, see if they're dumb or if they can actually go somewhere, because some of them do definitely have potential. We'll have to see. And I'm looking forward to doing another one of these videos in, I don't know, like a week or something when we have more reveals, because keep in mind, not even seen half the cards yet, baby. So far, I'm looking at these Shurima cards and I'm feeling pretty good. I do like what I'm seeing overall. Like, Shurima's definitely a pretty sweet expansion. I'm loving a lot of kind of like the design elements so far that they've been showing off, and I can't wait to see more.